All right, a warning against hypocrisy. Oh, as if we need one. I mean, yeah. Oh, this is 23. I wasn't thinking of that. Okay. The seven woes, the teachers, the law, and Pharisees. Oh, well, it's it is still a very good thing to look at. So let's look at Jesus here in Matthew 23. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. So this is interesting. We were just talking about or looking at how Jacob's sons were deceitful and intentionally deceitful, and they probably learned that from mom and dad, who were also intentionally deceitful, and learned that from Laban, their moms would have. And dad would have learned that from his mom, Rebecca. And so the whole family has this deceitful streak within them, and they learned that. So here, this isn't a parental, don't do as I say, not as I do. This is a religious leaders, do as I say, not as I do. So they tell you to do things, and you're supposed to because they have the authority, and you're supposed to obey them, but don't do what they actually do. Be willing to obey what they say, but don't do what they do. Don't live like they do because they're not living right. Everything they do is done for people to see. They make their phylacteries, and that is the little boxes containing scripture verses worn on the forehead and the arm. And that goes back to Deuteronomy, where it says it's the Shema. And if you read through the whole Shema, take these words that I'm giving you today, bind them on your forehead, bind them on your wrist, put them on the corners of your garment. And so they took that literally. They made little boxes and they put scripture in the box that they wore on their head and on their wrist, and then also attached on the ends of their garments would have been another place they would do that. They phylacteries wide, so they make a big one, so you know that theirs is big, so it's got to be packed full of scripture. And the tassels on their garment long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplace and to be called rabbi by others. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructor, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you must be the servant, for those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. I spent quite a bit of time on this section here. I was interested in this whole idea of humble yourself and being exalted and looking at that, and also this whole thing of being called rabbi, being called father. Um, I think other translations use something besides instructor. It says teacher, I believe, in other translations. And it's literally, it's like, well, Jesus, how do we not do that? Is this meant literally don't call anyone rabbi? Jewish people still refer to their leaders, religious leaders, as rabbi. The Catholic Church and others, I believe Anglican Church would also do this. Trying to think if the Episcopal, or yes, still the same. I mean, the Eastern Orthodox, whether they call father or not. No, I think they call priest, maybe. I don't know. But some denominations do have father as a title. And I thought, oh, Jesus warned us and said, don't do that. So does he mean that literally? Or does he mean that figurative? What is Jesus trying to teach us here? And it goes back to what is the thing that they are seeking. They are seeking importance, and you are supposed to be a servant. So anything that you have as a title that separates and elevates you above the people you are serving is something that has the potential to set you apart, to allow it to go to your head. So, for instance, I do have pastor friends who have doctorate degrees and they want to be called doctor. Now, there's a difference between calling them doctor to honor them and them demanding to be called doctor. I think someone that demands to be called doctor um, is a little insecure or has a big ego. One of the two. I'm not sure which. There could be other reasons, but in some regards, just to simplify it, I would say I think there's a grain of truth in that. Also, I'm not big on, hey, call me Reverend. Yes, I am an ordained minister, and that allows me to the title of Reverend. When there is a place that I need to use the title, I use it. I don't need to use it. It doesn't matter. If someone calls me pastor, I'm fine with that because that's what I am. But I swear, I don't have mind calling flat cap. That's great. Um, just, hey, I'm not set apart from the standpoint of all of us who are Christians are supposed to be set apart. So therefore, why would I be bigger or different in that regard? That's what he's trying to teach here to the disciples. And every time you see this, humble yourselves, it is an act that you do to take on humility, to take on roles of a servant. Um, and if you don't humble yourself, God humbles you. So I think that those two things are true. So anyway, I could get sidetracked on this. Like I said, I did a whole study on this idea of humility and of names. And so that's how this section is introduced. And I want us to keep that in mind. It's the elevation of oneself and the looking at and trying to have the accolades of people, which, if you remember when we were in Matthew quite a while ago, but in the Sermon on the Mount, there was this whole section of doing your things to be seen by others. And now we have a reference that we should all be remembering that back in 5 through 7 and primarily some of the stuff in 7, that he's now bringing that back up and pointing to the Pharisees that they do all of those things that he said back in 5 and 7. And here's some of the way they do it. They love to be in the place of honor at banquets. Yeah. And the most important seats at the synagogue. A side note, if you don't know this, there used to be a thing called pew rentals. Maybe there's still churches that do this today. However, unlike today in most churches where most people want to sit in the back and the front seats are vacant, the most expensive seats that you could rent for your family, and it would have your family placard on the edge of the seat. Some would do this, not all, but some would have a little placard there that would have the family name, and you rented that row, that pew for your family. And the closer you were to the front, the more expensive they got. So everyone knew when they came to church who had the most important seats, the one who spent the most money to get in the front row. Who had the least important seats? The person in the back. So the place of honor was in the front row. And so there's other places where Jesus talks about knowing, treating people based on what they give. Good grief, the church did that. They treated people based on what they gave by having them sit in the front row, and everyone in the church knew that the closer to the front you sat, the more you gave to the church. So here's the woes to that kind of behavior. Here's the 7 woes to the teachers of laws and Pharisees. And 7, I think, is there for a reason to show the completeness of it. So it's not that there aren't other things that they might need warnings about, but it's a complete warning, a total warning. It's the fullness of the warning that they're going to get. Okay, so just some guy in Tennessee says, I think the church you grew up in put the placards in memory of people that had passed, but I don't think they had assigned seats. Yeah, that's another practice that is common in some places, and it's not just churches. This is a common practice that if someone gives a donation that you might put a placard up in honor of them, and that could be on the money that they gave was specific to this thing that they gave, and or the item they gave was something they gave. I'm not a big fan of that, and I'm not because of honoring the person, but just for instance, if and I'm mentioning that because the place I'm staying is has placards all over the place, and there's one on the wall that says that the furniture, the couch, was given in memory or honor of a person. What do you do when that chair couch wears out and you need to replace it? What do you do with the placard? What do you do with the couch? How do you go about upgrading, change? So I'm thinking of practical nature that you get stuck in, you can't change it, you can't move it because someone gave it and we put a name on it. So anyway, that's a side thought. Some people get upset if someone else sits in their place. Oh yeah, that's a separate thing. Yeah, yeah. If someone sits in your place, I actually was in a church and there was an individual that told someone to get out of their seat before worship because a visitor sat in their seat, didn't know it was their seat. Yeah, it was just ugly. Yeah, you went to the zoo and almost every bench had someone's name on it. Yeah. And again, there's places where I'm not opposed to putting your name on things, but who's the one deciding to put the name on? Let me put it that way. I've known individuals who gave money to organizations charitably with the caveat that they have their name on the building that they gave the money to. I've known other individuals who gave money to things, asked not to have their name put on buildings, and then they did put that person's name on to honor them. And there's the what's the motivation behind it? One, the motivation is to have everybody know your name, and the other was a motivation to honor the person who had given the gift. So I think that is always, and then we'll get into some of that when we get into the text here. Yeah, yeah. Actually, a couch in memory makes sense. At some point, you need to let go. Yeah, yeah. Say the bench had a good life. I like that. Yes, yes. But well, here's another thing: is if it's something that is of a small value, there's still someone whose feelings might be hurt when you have a label on it and you need to get rid of it because that was grandma gave that 200 or 100 years ago, and now we can't get rid of grandma or great grandma's thing in the church or other places. Just because a seat in public place has a name on it doesn't mean you should tell a visitor to move. Yes, absolutely, Alice. This wasn't even a, and then I've, yes, I've witnessed it. I'm sure other people have too. Yes, that is a horrible thing to do. It is a self-centered thing, and yeah, that's the kind of stuff Jesus is going to warn us about. So let's go ahead and get into some of these. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Okay, some manuscripts have similar words to Mark and Luke. Okay. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. So here's the second one. So the first one was short. The second one looks like it's also short, and then we're going to get some longer ones. You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you succeed, you make them twice a child of hell as you are. Ouch. Now, he hasn't said why yet, so he's just saying what you do. Woe to you, blind guides. You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing, but anyone who swears by the gold of the temple is bound by that oath. You blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing, but anyone who swears by the gift on the altar is bound by that oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred. Therefore, anyone who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And anyone who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. And anyone who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and by the one who sits on it. So I believe elsewhere Jesus said not to swear by anything, to just let your yes be yes and your no be no. So here's a different teaching. So it's not negating the other one that says you don't need to swear by anything. Your yes should stand for itself. Your no should stand for itself. This is a correcting of their theology, thinking that it's gold that should be sworn by, not the one who makes the thing they're swearing by sacred. It's God who dwells in the temple. It's God whose altar it is and whose sacrifice you're giving to God. It's Him who sits on the throne that makes all these things sacred. And you're trying to swear by something claiming it's sacred so you wouldn't want to dishonor it. That's hence why you're swearing by it. But you're missing the point. You totally missed it. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spice, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. So if you've ever had a fly in your soup and you need to strain it out, yep. Got to get that gnat out of there, but hey, there's a camel in my soup. Yeah, that's all right. We'll just take that down. So you take down the big, the big things you should be against, and the little things. That's where you're experts. So justice, mercy, and faithfulness. That's a big thing. Should have been focused on that. Not did I give a tenth of the mint, the dill, or the cumin. If you've grown those, they're just well. They're spices, and they're just little leaves that you're collecting. Even dill, they end up little seeds. I have dill that I grew. I don't use dill a lot, but I have dill I grew 2 years ago. I still have dill left. If I collected all of that and I gave it, the making sure I accurately had a tenth of the dill, boy, I'd rather give it a lot more than spend the time figuring out a tenth of the dill. I mean, it was just here it is. Use it. I mean, you're taking tiny little spices and you're making sure you've given the amount you need to about them. But big things like justice and mercy and faithfulness, you don't get them. You ignore them. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. Again, the same title every time. You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisees, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside also will be clean. So saying inside you've got greed and self-indulgence. But your outside looks good. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs. You look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of bones, of death, and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. I think this is probably the one we might know the best, the whitewashed tombs. Yeah, if you think of a mausoleum, I think that's a good image here. Or a coffin. It's polishing the outside of a coffin to make sure it's nice and shiny and polished, but it doesn't matter. Inside's a deceased person. That's the dead. Yeah. You make the outside look good, but inside full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. Again, boom, boom, boom. He's hitting them with that same one. You build tombs for the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous. And you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would have not taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourself that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Go ahead then and complete what your ancestors started. I love this one. Here's the thing. that you need to catch. You testify against yourself that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Why is that important? Well, let's look at this. Why did they go into exile? They went into exile because their ancestors had sinned. God's view of sin is bigger than sin of the individual. There is such a thing as a corporate sin. There is a sin of the people of God. Why did the people of God go into exile? Because they corporately sinned. They sinned again and again. Now, there's several reasons listed. One of them was they didn't listen and obey what the prophets had commanded them to do. They didn't obey and fulfill the law. They weren't worshiping God. They were worshiping the false idols and false gods. They were doing the sacrifices to other gods they shouldn't have done. There's also, they didn't leave the Jubilee year that they were supposed to do every 7 years. So that goes to the greed they were talking about earlier. There was no justice, mercy. Those were things that were absent from people. They took bribes, all this stuff. So if the people went into exile, and I hope you follow with this, if the people went into exile because their ancestors had sinned, now they're making a declaration that they are the descendants of the ones who murdered the prophets. Well, then you need to pay the penalty for murdering the prophets. You should not be bragging about it. You shouldn't be declaring we're the descendants of the ones who murdered the prophets and we're smarter and wiser than them, and we wouldn't have done it. That's arrogance. That's just pride. And yet, he said, you just admitted to the corporate sin, and that corporate sin is going to be paid for at some point. And you're saying, yes, we did that. Our ancestors did this. Like, you just don't get it. You're decorating, and then, because you want to prove how righteous you are, which you're not, you build big monuments to the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous. So, in other words, like, you would have been preaching against John the Baptist over there. You were in hearty agreement that, hey, thanks, Herod, for getting rid of him. He was a pain in our side. And now what you're going to do? You're probably going to go build a monument to John the Baptist. Yeah, okay. So go ahead then and complete what your ancestors started. What's that? That's going to be to kill the prophet. Which one? Well, him, Jesus. Finish what your ancestors started. You're going to kill me. And then the blood of you is going to be on your hands. So you're not. You're arrogantly saying you're smarter and wiser than your ancestors who killed the prophets. And here you have the ultimate prophet, the anointed Son of God, who's come, what? To declare the truth of God to you. And you're going to kill him. Yeah, you don't get it. Okay. Anyway, long aside there, but I love that one. There's a lot of truth in that we need to think about in the church today in other regards. So now he switches. So let's see, was that number 7? Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so he's finished these 7 woes, and now he switches. You snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell? Therefore, I am sending you prophets and sages and teachers. Some of them you will kill and crucify. Notice the crucify mentioned there. Others you will flog in the synagogues and pursue them from town to town, foreshadowing of what they do with Paul, and also what Paul does, by the way, pursuing town to town. And so upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Now, there's some debate about who that is, if this name means someone in the Old Testament or a more recent person in modern to them, the modern era that they would have been living in. So, not going to get into that. Whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Think about that. He was in the temple and the altar. So the outer court and the altar is where he is, and he got murdered there. Truly, I tell you, all this will come on this generation. So the blood that was shed, that you've done, and your declaration that you are of the ancestors who did this, yeah, that's all coming on you. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who sent you, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Let your house, look, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And that's Psalm 118. Isn't it fascinating here? Just think about this. He's just told them, you proudly boast about being the descendants, and it might not be the way they word it, but they will say, we're the descendants of our ancestors. And knowing your ancestors killed the prophets, you're proud to brag about that and say you were smarter than them, you would be wiser than them, and you build monuments to the prophets because you understand who the prophets really were, and they did, and you're smarter. And he's saying, you're going to kill and crucify those sages and teachers and prophets I'm sending you. You're going to flog them in the synagogue. You're going to pursue them from town to town. Righteous blood is going to be on your head, and you're not going to see me again until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Now, imagine how irritating the triumphal entry of Jesus is, knowing that he told them, you're not going to see me again until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Now, I'm not thinking the Pharisees and the religious leaders and the teachers of the law are going to say that, but the people are. The people certainly are. So, continuing, Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call attention to its buildings. Do you see all these things? He asked. Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. Okay, so here's one of those times where people want to say there's only one way to interpret the Bible, and it has to always be literal. And I'm going to ask a simple, obvious question. Did Jesus mean this statement literally? And if he did, has it been fulfilled yet? Do you see these things? So he's talking about the temple building, and this is the one in the first century when he's living, the one that Herod built. Do you see all these things? Truly, I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another until everyone will be thrown down. Did he mean that literally, or was he speaking figuratively? Well, if Jesus meant this literally, it hasn't been fulfilled. Why do I say that? Because there's still the Wailing Wall. People can still go to Jerusalem today. It's also called the Western Wall. And there's a wall there that was part of this temple structure, and there's stones on top of stones. So Jesus either got it wrong, or it hasn't happened yet, or he didn't mean it literally. So those who at times people tell you everything in Bible should be literal, they're denying that we can understand things that way that Jesus meant them or others meant them to be understood. Jesus wasn't talking here saying, oh my goodness, every single stone has to be unstacked. Every rock has to be moved from on top of each other. They can't still be there. No, he's describing total destruction. Would you describe the temple as being totally destroyed? I would. That's what Jesus is doing here. The temple is totally destroyed. I can't go worship in the temple. Yeah, there's a remnant of a wall there. There's a piece that's an ancient ruin. That's it. So in that sense, yes, he meant literally the temple would be destroyed, and figuratively, he gave the illustration to show it's going to be a total destruction. I'd call it total. So anyway, just an aside there. So whenever you do hear people who do have that, want to say you have to take everything literal, they have to wrestle with things like this from time to time that can't be literal, or they have to be wrong, or they have to be yet to come. And that's really the only choices that there are. So continuing, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? So the disciples are starting to get what Jesus was saying here with the woes. They were starting to get it. And he tells them about the temple, and they're starting to get that. So they're like, okay, we heard him say that. Just tell us. We won't tell anybody else. Jesus, tell us when this is going to happen. Jesus answered, watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nations will rise against nations, and kingdoms against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Here's one of the things I'll say in regards to this. People have been able to sense when, I'll say since 70 AD, to start to claim these things. World War I, would that be nations rising against nations? Yes. Kingdom against kingdom? Yes. Was it happening way before then? Sure. Were there famines? Yes. I remember in the 80s we had We Are the People and Live Aid and all these things. Why? Because there was great famines in Ethiopia and throughout Africa. Are there earthquakes? Yes, they make the news every time there are massive earthquakes. And where do they happen? They happen all over the world. And once said, these are the beginning of birth pains. So the beginning of birth pains have maybe started in 70 AD and they're still ongoing. Are there wars and rumors of wars? Yep. That's happening right now. Should we be alarmed? No. Such things must happen. We're not to be alarmed. We're to see them, we're to observe them, and we're to know God is still in control of all things. So, Miss Jellybeans, love the way you offer insight on verses. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I heard interesting take on the rumors of war. That wouldn't have been able to happen until the advent of mass communication. Well, you could make that argument from one perspective. However, I'm going to say I'm going to disagree with that. You can have rumors of war because you can have rumors without having mass media. I mean, people tell rumors without using social media or even mass communication. Rumors just spread by people talking to one another. So if the Huns were coming across the steppe, which is the region to the east of the Roman Empire. They're coming across there. There's rumors of the Mongols coming long before the Mongols show up at the door of the empire and start attacking. So I'm gonna say I don't. There probably is a point of what they're saying and making a point on a scale of stuff, but I'm gonna just say no. I think you can have rumors of wars without having to have social media. But anyway, we could debate that. And I'm sure they were making a specific point that I'm not bringing out. So after that, then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. So he is talking to the disciples here. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. I think he's speaking specifically to the disciples here and what's going to happen, so that they are prepared for it. I think that's the reason he's saying is for us to be prepared about things and the certainty that God's still in control. Interesting thought there. I could go look the word up for rumors if we want. The idea of rumor could also be interpreted news of. Yes. Let's go look that up. So this is Matthew 24. That's a good insight. I like that thought. 6. Oh, yeah, there it is 6. Here, wars and, well, it's okay. Yeah. Akoye, sense of hearing, an organ of hearing, heard, instruction, oral, reports. Yeah, there we go. Report or rumor, hearsay. Ah, okay. in that regard, it could also convey misinformation, which that also not entirely new. Um, if you go and watch anything on the Revolutionary War, there were spies that George Washington had in a spy ring, and they also were spreading rumors about things to deceive the British about where they were at and other things. So rumors are used within war as a means to fight war. So that's interesting. So yeah, hearsay. I like that kind of thought. Yeah. So the reports of it, rumors about it, hearsay of it, those kinds of things. So, okay, so I was pointing out here that the disciples should expect what? To be handed over to be persecuted and put to death. That's the thing he's telling them. That's the important thing, is to expect this, because what? At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Okay, so now we have a progression from this is what's going to happen to the disciples all the way till the end will come. Where do things overlap? Where are the things that have been happening since the beginning? Where are the things that haven't happened yet? I don't think we're supposed to parse that out and figure it out. Um, there is here this also thought, but the increase of wickedness and the will happen. The love of most will grow cold, but those who stand firm to the end will be saved. So there is the hey, hold faith, hold it strong, stay till the end. There's that kind of thought. This is meant to be an assurance to the disciples in the midst of the persecution that they will face. Some are going to turn away. Don't be surprised by it. Some will betray. Don't be surprised by that. And hate each other. Don't be surprised by that. False prophets will appear. Don't be surprised. Deceivers will come. Don't be surprised. Would I say that's happened throughout history? Yes, it has. Would I say that that's happened in a degree that looks like the end is here? Maybe, maybe not. Uh, there's times where maybe it looked that way, and I'm sure that it's going to look even worse before the end comes. So, are we in the beginning of birth pains? Well, maybe, maybe. But Jesus says all is the beginning of birth pains, not the fullness of the pains to come. So, okay, so now we'll get into this is how do you interpret what some of these things mean? And there's several possibilities. So I'm not going to go into a lot of possibilities. There's either it has happened possibly or it hasn't happened. Um, and you can go a couple of different ways. So, and there also, well, I'll go the third one. There could be it has been fulfilled and it will be fulfilled. I think that's one of the most prominent things that we should see in Scripture. If you look at Scripture that happened in the Old Testament, often it looks like it's fulfilled in the occasion when it happens. It also looks like it's fulfilled in the New Testament. And I think there also could be a future fulfillment when Jesus returns. God isn't limited to fulfilling something only once. So if I say, and I believe, and maybe you do, or maybe you don't, that this was fulfilled, it doesn't negate it from being possibly fulfilled again. So let me put it that way. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. Let the one in the field go back to get no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. Why on the Sabbath? Because you can only travel so far on the Sabbath. For then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. Okay, so it's that last phrase, and never to be equaled again, that causes many people to think can only be future. But if you say, what is the abomination that causes desolation? I think if you read through the description of what happens before the temple is destroyed, and Jesus was just talking about the temple that's there being destroyed, not a future temple being rebuilt and a future temple being destroyed, that Jesus has in mind what happens when the Romans come in 70 AD and they destroy Jerusalem. I think that's what he has in mind here. I think that's what he's talking about, and that's in the near future. And he is talking to them, and you will be handed over. I think that's the near future fulfillment that Jesus was talking about. I do think there's a possibility that there still is a future fulfillment. It could be both. I don't think there's a necessary future fulfillment that we all have to be waiting around for. And here's one reason why. If there has to be a future fulfillment of this, and there has to be a new temple built, and it has to be in a specific geographic location so that this can be fulfilled, then until we build it, we're postponing Jesus from being able to return. And if we believe that he can return and his return is soon, then we're delaying his return by not building a temple. That seems limiting to God to me. And so that's why I wouldn't go in that direction. So I won't go into this in more detail, but just know that there are denominations and different beliefs of understanding what Jesus is talking about here. There are different perspectives and views, and I think there is room for many of us to have disagreement about if this was fulfilled or will be fulfilled or could be both. And we can still worship together. We can still praise God together. We can still follow God together. We can still do all those things. Understanding this and having it precise isn't as important as knowing who Jesus is and why he came. So, if those days were not cut short, no one would survive, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. See, this could be what? The persecution under Nero. That's what that could be, or it could be future. See, again, we can go in lots of directions with these things. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, the Messiah is here, there he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you ahead of time. So he's warning them that this is a possibility, false teachers, false prophets, and persecutions. So if anyone tells you there he is out in the wilderness, why would they say out in the wilderness? Because that's what John did. Do not go out. Or here he is in the inner rooms. Do not believe it. Why in the inner room? Jesus appeared to them suddenly in the inner room, the upper room. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. So you don't have to worry about it when he really comes. It'll be clear. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Okay, so this would be one of those reasons why people say, see, it hasn't happened yet. It still needs to be fulfilled. So that's if this has to literally happen, unless this was a figurative language. So we can argue about that, and I'm not going to. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the people of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. So here you have immediately, so it sounds like it has to be future, because then will appear this. So I'm not going to argue against that. I'm just going to say immediately is a word that is used to describe certainty, not always to describe what happened next. If we go through some of the Gospels, Mark specifically immediately next, immediately next, immediately next, immediately next. So if you read through all those immediatelys, you have a very, very, very long day at times with no night. So immediately is not meant to be taken literally always. It sometimes is a narrative tool to move the reader to what will happen next. So we don't use that as a narrative tool. They did. Now learn the lesson from the fig. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know summer is near. Even so, when you see these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away till all these things happen. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. So so I said, I'm pointing these out, that this generation will certainly not pass away till all these things happen. Well, if all these things are future, no one from that generation is alive. What did Jesus mean? So this is where we have this back and forth, trying to understand. Jesus is giving us this information. Here's the thing that I think in regards to all of it. All of it is true. And all of it, when Jesus returns, will be fully understood in the same way that we can look back at the Old Testament, and Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John look back at the Old Testament and say, here's the fulfillment of all of those things in the Old Testament, and Jesus did all the fulfilling of those things. And they revealed that to it, and it was in Jesus's death, burial, resurrection, and ascension that caused the revealing of those things. So I think in the second coming, when it all happens, the revealing of how, when, all that, and what was fulfilled and how it was fulfilled will be fully understood. Until then, we're doing our best, and we'll get some of it wrong. And so did everybody the first coming. So if they all got it wrong, at least partially or mostly, in the first coming, why would we boast and brag and think that we have it all right in the second coming? The point is that we're supposed to have assurance through all of the trials and tribulations that the second coming is indeed coming. That's the thing. My words will never pass away. That's the assurance. The day and the hour unknown. But about the day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son. Yeah. Oh, some do not have nor the Son. Oh, interesting. But only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving to marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Two will be in the field, one will be taken, and the other will be left. Two women will be grinding the mill, one will be taken, and the other will be left. Okay, so I want to look at this. So he says, so it will be in the days of Noah. They knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. So they know nothing about it. Nothing. And then it happens. So we're going to really know nothing about it. No one knows the hour, not even the angels or the Son. So why are we trying to figure it out? We're not supposed to. We're not going to know. We're going to know nothing about it until it happens. Now, this other one, will be in the field, one will be taken, and the other left. The understanding in ancient times, if you go back and read some of the church fathers, was that the one taken was taken away to destruction. The one left was the righteous one, not what more modern thinking is, has reversed this, that the one taken is snatched away because they're taking other passages into account and taking us out of the world. The ancient church didn't read it that way. The two in the field, the one that's left is the righteous one. The one that's taken is the one that's not righteous, and they're taken away to destruction. So what's the point? Keep watch, therefore, keep watch, because you do not know on what day the Lord will come. But understand this: if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Yeah, exactly, Miss Jellybeans. We have reversed some things. Why? Because we didn't always go back and read what they thought earlier on, and sometimes we come up with our own thinking about things. Exactly. That's what has now been interpreted, that this is a rapture that's happening from other passages reading into this passage. Why? Because we have a modern thought that everything has to be cohesive, fully together, and describe everything in total 100% agreement with no variations whatsoever. So that, for instance, I'll give one where I don't know how you reconcile it. There's there's different passages of Jesus' triumphal entry. We haven't got there yet, but in one of them, it's a single donkey. In another one, it's a donkey and a colt. So which was it? Because they both can't be true. Well, one was making a point that it was a donkey and a colt, and the other was saying, well, there wasn't. So we come up with these reasons to explain things. We have to do that at times to try to force our ideas of accuracy onto something that wasn't the point of how they were writing or doing things. So again, the point is, therefore keep watch. We don't know, because the Son of Man will come at an hour you do not expect. So to go back to there has to be a temple rebuild, and once it's rebuilt, and then we know this happens, we'll all be ready and we'll see it. Well, then it would come when we expect it. So there has to be something that still throws that off. Even if that is a thing that has to happen, there still has to be something that throws it off, so that we're not expecting it, but we're supposed to be expecting it. So, who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants of his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for the servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. So we need to be about the master's work while he's gone, not sloughing off thinking he won't return anytime soon. Think about this: when if your parents ever went away on vacation for a week and you had chores to do, and you spent, well, 5 days playing video games all day with your friends and making a mess of the place, and suddenly you know, oh no, tomorrow my parents are returning. What do? You suddenly start cleaning the house. What if they return early? You get caught having not done what you were supposed to. It's that kind of thought. So it's like your parents going away on vacation saying, yeah, we're leaving. We don't know when we'll be back. Just keep everything in order. Do this, this, and this, and make sure it's done, and we'll see you. What do you mean you don't know when they're coming back? We don't know when Jesus is coming back. So we need to be about the work we're supposed to be about. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time, and then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So let's see, who was he talking to? Oh, the disciples took him aside privately and asked him. That was at the beginning of this. The disciples came to him privately. It has not changed settings that I've seen yet. So all of this is to the disciples privately. So he's warning them about not being with who? The hypocrites, which he just done all the teaching about. You don't want to be with them. Don't get caught thinking, oh, the return, it's not imminent. If I think about, oh, the temple has to be built, yeah, the return's not imminent. We don't have to start evangelizing, and we don't have to start living for God until the temple gets rebuilt. There's one of the problems you have when you when you read and interpret scripture a certain way as this and this and this, and I understand it this way. Well, what if God does it differently than we understand? Did the Old Testament readers understand that a virgin was going to give birth in Bethlehem and that they were going to, Herod was going to kill all those babies who were under 2 years of age, and that he was going to have to flee to Egypt and then return? I want to say, I don't think so. They could have got pieces of it, but that whole thing, no. No, I'm going to say no, I don't think so. And yet, that's what happened, and we understand it, and we can see it because we're on the other side of it. So he's going to give them parables now to help them understand it. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps but did not take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise one, "Give us some of your oil. Our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourself." Okay, so this is in a modern thought. What are they talking about here? But if you have to have oil for your lamp and your lamp is burning all night long, and now you only had so much and you're running out of oil and you're not going to be able to go and be at the reception at the party and still have the meeting of the bridegroom, have the oil in your lamp for the whole thing. The others brought extra oil to refill. They were prepared to wait a long time. Often wedding festivals in ancient times were like 7 days. They weren't just this short 7-hour thing. They were 7 days. And so if you're prepared for it, you have enough oil to last you through the whole thing, all night long, every night, all the way through until it's time. So they didn't do it. They weren't prepared. Now they're trying to get some of what they needed from somebody else, and they're like, no. That's not going to happen. You weren't prepared. But while they were on their way to buy oil, so they leave, they hear the bridegroom is coming. There's the rumor he's coming. The bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the others also came. "Lord, Lord," they said, "open the door to us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I don't know you. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." The parable of the bags of gold. Again, it was like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and another 1 bag. Talents. 2 talents, 1 talent. Okay, so you may have heard this talent. I kind of like talent. Talent was a weight of measurement. We have, in some places, interpreted talent to be, well, our modern thinking of what a talent is. I have the talent of, well, I don't. Some people have the talent of playing musical instruments, so that would be a talent. So do you use that talent or not use that talent? We've taken and applied this. Now, I'm not saying in a bad way, but we've avoided the conversation around money. And so here, by calling it bags of gold, it helps us to understand the value of what was given and to not confuse or conflate and physical talent with monetary that Jesus was talking about. Okay, so 1, 5, 2, each according to his ability. I love that phrase there, each according to their ability. I would not, just thinking about this, and we go through the story, and I'm sure you know this, I'm not the one that should be getting 5 bags. I'm just going to say that. That's not me. I hope I'm not as dumb as the one with 1. I would hope I'm the one with 2. That's where I want to be. I'll be the one with 2. I know it'd be braggadocious, say, "Oh, well, I could be the one with 5. I don't think I am. I don't think I'm that good in most things. Fix some things, maybe, but most things, no. And if we're talking money, yeah, no. I'm not that good. If you want to multiply stuff, I might be able to add, but multiplying money, maybe not my thing. So then he went on a journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went out at once. Notice when he does this, doesn't wait. He takes action immediately. He put the money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one who had 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the one who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of these servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and I hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvested where I have not sown, and gathered where I have not scattered seed. Well, then, you should have put my money on deposit with bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw this worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So we have that phrase again, the weeping and gnashing of teeth there. Where did we have that earlier? The weeping and gnashing of teeth at the hour when he returns. So we have that image bringing back to mind when the Son of Man returns. So we don't miss that this is a parable and a story and a teaching about Jesus being the landlord who gives to us, and we are to be about his work, and we are to multiply what we do for the kingdom. So don't miss that. And here, what's interesting is the one who did not do anything except bury it says, I knew you gathered where you didn't sow, and where you didn't, you harvest where you did not sow, and gather where you didn't sow your scatter seed. So you get more from places you didn't even have anything to do with. So he's terrified to lose money, as opposed to excited to do something with what he has. So anyway, he operates out of fear rather than out of joy and love for the master. Okay, so now we have another one. So he's not done. So he's telling several of these, all trying to convey a similar, if not the same, idea. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on glorious thrones. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Now, before we go on, what was the previous parable? Because these are told back to back. It was to the one he gave 5 bags, to the one he gave 2, to the one he gave 1. And then it was, what did they do with it? Now he's saying, in order to enter into the kingdom, remember the other one was enter into your master's, what was it? Come and share your master's happiness. So they're entering in by having done things. So what is Jesus describing as what those things were that were multiplying the 5 bags? It was this: hungry, gave something to eat; thirsty, gave something to drink; stranger, invited them; in need of clothing, gave them clothes; was sick, looked after; was in prison, came to visit. Is that the only list? Is it that those are the things we literally have to do? If I'm not involved with feeding the hungry, um, if I'm not involved with bringing water to people in need of water, if I don't invite strangers into my house, if I don't give my clothing away, if I don't take care of people with medical needs, if I don't go to prison and visit people, then I'm not doing it? Or is it I get to pick one and I just focus on that? No, I think this is a description of doing what? What Jesus talked about earlier when he said, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I, as a mother hen, wanted to take you under my wings and you wouldn't let me." It is doing for people where their needs are and seeing them, having compassion on them, and responding. I think that's the point here, not the literal, here's a checklist, do these things. Now, I'm not saying doing these things aren't bad. I mean, we shouldn't be in efforts to do all of these things. I think we should. I think there's more beyond this, is the point I want to make. That this is only a small description of the kinds of things of seeing someone in need and meeting the need. I think that's the point. Then the righteous will say to him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or in need of clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, truly, I tell you, whenever you did for one of the least of these brothers or sisters of mine, you did for me. So it is the act of what? Doing for someone what their need is. That's when we've done this. Then he will say to those on the left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. They also will answer, Lord, when we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needed clothes or sick or in prison and didn't help you. Notice that the righteous ask all of the questions, and here the unrighteous just, when did we do any of those? When did we not do those things? When did we see you in those conditions and didn't do it? They just put it all in one sentence. Just not that that's anything significant. I just find it interesting. He will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. Okay, so we we had a long section, and I think it is really good to take all of this together. 23 all the way to 25. Maybe look at 26 in a minute. Okay, maybe not 26. When he finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, okay, so there, yeah, there's a good thought that yes, it does confirm, and it does appear that, look, he said to his disciples. So this has been all private teaching to his disciples. This was not to the crowds. It was not to the Pharisees. At least this part section. The woes were. But 24 is where he took them, or they were together, and they said to him, tell us. The disciples came to him privately. Tell us. So he talked about all these woes. He talked about the things to come, and now he unveils it in more depth. And what's the point? He will come. He will return. There's certainty of it. He's in control of all things. And what are we to do? We are to serve him all the way up until the end. No, regardless of what happens. What are some of the things that might happen? Well, he talked about being turned over and persecution happening. Yeah, he talked about the wickedness of the world increasing. He talked about the needs of people being there. He talked about some thinking that, well, he's not returning anytime soon. We don't have to do anything and just sloughing off. There's all of those dangers. And he's saying, those that endure to the end, they'll be there and ready to what? Meet the bridegroom when he comes. So we're the bride of Christ, and we are to be ready and doing all the things out of love and compassion for those around us to serve as Jesus served, that we are striving to be sheep and not goats. I mean, we can read through all of these things. And so that's our Matthew passage for today. So that was good. That was a good section. It starts out with the woes, and some people don't like woes. We got a bunch of woes in Isaiah. These are more directed at the Pharisees. And like I said, we should think that there are some also in Matthew 7, I believe. Let me just go look that up. Asterisk, knock, narrow gate, false prophets, woes. No, wise to foolish builders. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not. I go 5 through 7. There's the Beatitudes, salt and light, criminal law. Yeah, that's you've heard it, but I tell you, needy prayer, fasting, treasures heaven. Do not worry, judging others. Okay, maybe I was wrong. I thought there were some woes in there. Oh, there's the watch out for false prophets. That might be what I was thinking of. True and false disciples. Okay, so here's the parallel so you have the true and false disciples, sheep and goats. You have the true and false prophets. He talks about that. Narrow and wide gate. So there is a parallel here in the teaching that I was thinking of. I thought there was some well there, but maybe it's just an indirect thinking. Anyway, so that's Matthew 23 through 25. So, all right.